Now, you don't realize what an amazing opportunity you have. The biggest supporters of what you do are guys like this. And in the last 10 years, our military, particularly our combatant commanders, have understood that, as they say, you can't kill your way to power. You can't kill your way to success. So we've got an opportunity now to hear from the three guys who are combatant commanders. Now, what that means is the military stands up, and we will have a map in a minute to show you what combatant commands are. But the military has a number of commands. The combatant commanders are the tip of the spear. These are the people, men who are responsible, and someday women, who are responsible for the United States military forces in large parts of the world. And so I want to ask you, because you don't really have a lot of experience. I saw how many veterans stood up. Most of you don't really know what these guys do, so we're going to ask them. I wanted to start with, I think we'll start with you, General Craddock. Let me ask you about what a typical day is like in the commands that you've had, in the European Command as well as in the Southern Command. What's your day like?
Well, thanks, first of all, KT, for the opportunity to be here and for that question. And to the Global Leadership Coalition, I certainly appreciate the time that we'll spend here today with you. In the interest of full disclosure, I must say that it's been several years since I left U.S. Southern Command, a few less since I left European Command. And my wife is prone to tell me over and over again, as the older I get, the clearer and clearer are the recollections of things that never were. So I'll do the best I can here with you today. U.S. Southern Command, 19-20 countries, Caribbean Basin, Central America, South America. Every day was a challenge, and it's a different challenge from my colleagues sitting here on the stage with me, in that I believe what you will hear from them is more of an issue of nations in their region with national security problems as well as public security problems, military and police, different threats. Southern Command, by and large, absent a couple of countries who had some border issues, was basically issues with transnational organized crime threats, and it was a public security issue unless the public security resources were unable to counter these transnational threats, this organized crime threat, read traffickers. Then it got to be national security level, and different resources were applied from different angles to counter that. So my day-to-day was, first of all, security cooperation. Large title, what is it? It's a lot of things. It's promoting security from the perspective of national security, and where possible, with authorities granted, promoting public security, moving into the policing realm if there was a threat to the national security in a specific country. And we had a couple of those in Southcom. There was also promoting and enhancing stability. How did we do that? In many ways. Through interface with the U.S. mission, with all of the different representatives of U.S. departments and agencies at the mission, seeing how we could leverage our capability in the Department of Defense in certain areas where others do not have capability to make enablers, as I heard the term earlier, enablers for them to be able to do their job better, easier, with more lasting, greater impact. And then promoting prosperity to the extent we could do that. At one point, I was on the Hill as the commander of U.S. Southern Command, advocating for the Central America Free Trade Agreement, because if trade enhanced, prosperity enhanced, that would mean we would further security. The reason that people turn to alternate forms of government would be reduced, and it was a win-win proposition. So that was by and large a day. Now, if you look at it cyclically throughout the year, we had training exercises. That's in the security assistance, where we try to enhance our friends and allies and neighbors' military capability. We would plan those, we would prepare, we would conduct, so we were always in a cycle of training exercises. We also had both planned and reactive humanitarian disaster response. We would plan exercises in disaster response. Unfortunately, because of the nation, we would have to respond to disasters and provide our capability. And then also the humanitarian assistance, which in my judgment was the greatest return on the investment that we made in U.S. Southern Command, was the conduct of humanitarian exercises and providing medical capability exercises with med caps, we called them, or dental or veterinarian, to the rural parts of the nations of the region. And so that kept us busy all the time.
Great. That was an easy day, right? Now we're going to ask a guy, General Ward, whose responsibility was to set up and to stand up, it's called in military terms, the Africa Command. The United States didn't have a military command devoted just to Africa until General Ward took over. So what was an average day for you like?
Oh, I think I'll concur with John. First of all, it's great to be here this evening, and I guess you've had a great day. We've already told how wonderful the previous speakers have been, so we know we've been set up, and nothing is between you and the rest of the evening, whatever that is, except us. So we'll try to enlighten you as best we can, understanding that nothing will work at this hour today, but we'll do our best. First of all, it was an absolute pleasure and joy to establish a command for the first time that caused our nation to recognize a part of the world that had an importance to it that we still don't quite understand, but clearly a step taken to recognize the importance of a part of our global commons that will mean so much to us today, but importantly, 20 and 50 years from now. So as we endeavor to create a command to stand up AFRICOM such that as it endeavored to ensure our national security interests, but at the same time related to our partners and friends on the continent in ways that they understood, we were certainly faced with a daily set of opportunities that we were all who are part of that endeavor very, very happy to be associated with. We had to build a team. We had to establish relationships, both here in the United States as well as with our friends on the continent of Africa. We had to establish relationships with our friends around the world who had likewise interests on the continent of Africa. We had to ensure that those things that were being done, as General Craddock mentioned, the military activities, building partner capacity, the various humanitarian exercises, things that we were doing complemented the work that was already being done on the continent by those who we were here to even talk about, our partners who were responsible for development, and as well as those diplomatic efforts that helped guarantee security. It was no day that was a typical day. This was a dynamic environment as we looked at what we were doing from our counterterror role, because clearly on the continent that was a part of our mission set, how we dealt with counterterror activities, such that they were in fact complementing the things that we were trying to do insofar as our other activities were concerned. So putting all that together with a very diverse and new team, teammates from across our government, teammates from across our services, teammates that were from across our private sector who already had interests on the continent, causing them to understand as best we could that we were there to be a force to support, assist, and reinforce their efforts as opposed to a force that was there to take over their efforts. So as we worked to do this, as we worked to build a team of sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, civilians, causing them to know that we were in fact working in ways that complemented every other member of the team. This business of partnership, of teamwork, all working together to help create a term that I call stability. Because when you have stability, then our national interests are in fact being served in the best way possible. So those days were days that were long, they were days that were complex, they were days that were different from one another, and they were days that were filled with the hope of a tomorrow because of our work on a continent that up to that point in time had been fragmented through the work of 3 separate commands, now being focused with the attention of a single command.
I think it's important to note that what General Ward did when he set up and stood up the Africa Command, it's the first time that the United States military has from the very beginning incorporated in the civilian element into your
I
command.
believe I saw my initial civilian deputy here. Where's Ambassador Mary Carlin Yates?
Oh,
there
right
she
over
is.
here.
Hey, Mary. That's exactly right. We had, first time ever from the outset, a civilian deputy with the command, and invaluable.
I guess you must have done a really good job. Congratulations. Now, I want to turn to probably the hardest working guy on the planet, Admiral Harward. You're the Deputy Commander of Central Command. Now, that sounds like it might be easy, right? It's countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, most of the Middle East, Arab countries. I can't imagine there's ever a typical day for you, but try to walk us through some of the challenges you faced.
Well, I'm just encouraged, KT, you and your predecessor, neither one of you mentioned Syria to start off.
Oh, right, Syria. We're going to get to that in a minute.
So we're off to a good footing.
That's
but,
your second question.
I would tell you I'm honored and happy to be here today, and I'm encouraged because the preponderance of the last 12 years I've been in Afghanistan and Iraq, where I was commonly referred to not only by my counterparts in the Afghan army as a general, but also my American bosses, such as Dave Petraeus and Stan McChrystal, just called me general and told me to get over it, so to speak. So to be here with my two Army brothers, but more importantly, to be here with the mother of a naval officer and to be with the Navy family, where we're on an equal setting here, is encouraging.
I have a feeling that as a Navy SEAL, he can hold his own in any company.
As you know, we're coming out of 12 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're finishing the transition to the government of Afghanistan here, and that will occur. As you know, we just handed over security milestone 13 this week, and we're moving forward to the final transition through the end of 14. And I'm encouraged when I see young officers like Pete Dixon, you had the video, those individuals who have worked from the bottom up with all the elements of power, nonprofit organization, NGOs who understand the granularity and all the capabilities they bring to the field. And I've seen that the past 6 years mature in a way like could not happen in a top-down approach. This had to happen on the ground, where those people doing the work had their fingers in the ground working together to understand it. Because as we come out of these two conflicts, my crystal ball is batteries have run down. I can't tell you what it's going to look like next year, the year after, but I know we're going to need that same understanding at the tactical and operational level to do the things we need to do to prevent conflict. Unfortunately, the experiences we've learned over the last 12 years or so have been post-bang. We need to codify, implement those procedures and that capability that the Department of Defense brings to bear in this partnership to avoid the bangs. So I'm really focused on the work you're doing and how we codify that, develop those techniques, procedures, and training to ensure we move forward leveraging what we've learned the last 12 years. CENTCOM's very focused as we look at some of these areas such as Syria right now. Today I don't want to talk about current operations, but I will talk about what we've learned and where we're going and how we're going to have to bring that capacity to bear to meet our national security objectives.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask you that question in a minute. General Ward talked about, especially having an ambassador as his number two, talked about U.S. government employees, whether they were military or civilian. I want to ask you, General Craddock, especially in your position in Southern Command, where you were dealing with Latin America and South America, you had to deal with humanitarian disasters, humanitarian relief, and you often had to work with a flurry of NGOs, non-government organizations, people who maybe didn't even think very well of the United States military. How were you able to pull all that together?
Sometimes quite difficultly. Let me use for an example storms that moved into Guatemala while I was down in Southcom. What we were able to do was not fix the problems created, mudslides, villages completely covered, bridges washed out, people without food, power, but we were able to bring capability in for others who do that. We quickly could bring in at a moment's notice, and all the ambassadors knew this, that we had the authority for 72-hour response without further authority from the Department of Defense. If they call and they have a problem with life and limb, indigenous people of the nation, then we could respond. So we could move in command and control. We do that pretty well. We could move in communications so that we could provide communications to NGOs, government agencies, indigenous nation, host nation folks, so we could at least coordinate the effort. And then transportation capacity. Helicopters, fixed wing, and we could move a lot of stuff, whether it's medicines, foodstuffs, whatever the case may be, to large airport locations, capital cities, and then forward into the countryside, wherever the emergency exists. The first thing was to get people on the ground, open up with the chief of mission, ambassador, find out what he needed, where he needed it, and then use the ambassador's capability, the embassy, the mission, as the nexus of all the support provided. If we go out on our own, we're going to get it wrong. We have to coordinate the effort through the host nation NGOs, international NGOs. Oftentimes, come in a little bit later, but with incredible, enormous capability, and we're there then to be able to move that forward as required.
I want to go and talk about Africa. When you set up the Africa Command, and as you know, you pointed out, you had the civilian component as well as the military component. Look at the flashpoints of the world today. Your job, as you said, was to prevent conflict. How are we doing in places like Mali, for example, or in other parts of Africa, or other parts of the world?
This is a partnership, KT. The command, as is reflective of those on many of the combatant commands, works in conjunction with partners, as John mentioned. You know, we work closely with our ambassadors on the continent. We work closely with the departments in the state. In my case, there were two, Near East as well as the Africa Bureau, to look at how our policy has been stated for a region. And the region is important. It's not just a country. Africa, a continent of now today 54 nations, including the island nations. They're all different, complex. The regions are different. So as we work with the various embassies, the African bureaus, as well as the Near East Bureau, our main endeavor was to cause what we did, those things that we brought, our capabilities, as you've heard a bit of those, to complement, to support. My motto was, we will add value and do no harm. And the first key was understanding, building relationships, understanding, as I said, from someone else's point of view, getting out of our foxhole, going downrange, looking back at what we were doing, and how does it fit with the overall set. And that understanding, as we worked, was an understanding that we were able to use, hopefully, to help bring stability. Not perfect, but it is a reality that things are improving and are getting better because of how we are coordinating and complementing the capabilities that we bring to a particular area in accordance with our national interests. And that coordination and complementarity comes through our defense work, our development work, our diplomatic work, working in ways that are harmoniously creating an impact that clearly is in our best interest as Americans, but equally important, being seen as in the interest of our partners and friends on the continent of Africa, so that they see our work as also being beneficial to them in their further development, increasing stability in their homes.
Let me turn to the man who's now actually right on the front lines. Admiral, I was struck by what you said a few minutes ago, that there are lessons learned. You know, after Vietnam, we unlearned a lot of lessons. As you said, we've spent 12 years at war, and we have learned, and often the hard way, some important aspects that we need to carry forward. I always think about that last scene in Charlie Wilson's War, where the United States, in conjunction with our allies in Afghanistan, had helped defeat the Soviet Union, and the effort is tried to make on Capitol Hill, and Gus is saying, but we need aid for schools, we need humanitarian assistance, and Congress just doesn't. And you're left with that question of what if only, maybe things would have been different. Can you talk about the challenges and how you plan to make sure that the United States military doesn't forget those lessons that we've learned?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not just our effort. I think we've bred a whole culture within the other elements of power in the U.S. government and understand that. I think of ambassadors like Ann Patterson, who served in Pakistan. We work closely together on border issues, who's now the ambassador to Egypt, who was the forefront in working with Congress on how to move forward with foreign military sales, foreign military funds. She became the main spokesman. And when she went to the Hill, she said, called me, Bob, come up here and help me explain this. But it wasn't DOD pushing that agenda, traditionally a DOD, but the ambassadors. So these ambassadors and the country teams understand this as well. And as you know, we do not conduct any operations in a country without the approval and understanding of that chief of mission and that country team. And so that's built a culture that I think is going to permeate for years to come. Those individuals who served at those PRTs in Afghanistan.
You have to explain in English, what is a PRT?
The Provincial Reconstruction Teams, where they integrated all the elements of power together at the tactical level to bring in military engineers who could plan a work, contract with foreign governments to pay for the funding, NGOs who would coordinate with the local villages to bring these services online. So those tactical level officers who will make careers and grow, I think they'll take with it. We therefore then need to inculcate that into our doctrine, our training, our techniques, and you're starting to see that happen. If you look at some of the manuals General Petraeus and General Mattis did on COIN, you're starting to see. I'm sorry, counterinsurgency operation. I'm sorry, KT, excuse me.
I'm here to keep you honest.
And you're seeing now that permeate out into our training standards at the tactical levels and those understanding, so that when that young captain is going through his qualification course on how to deal with a village, he knows and understands, ooh, this is how I reach out to USAID. This is how I coordinate with the embassy. He's aware of with that. I can tell you, up until my operational level of war, I had no understanding of that at all. We've bred a whole new generation who understands the value and capacity all of these organizations bring together. And I hope that's happening in those other organizations as well. So I'm optimistic, and we'll have to see how it plays out here.
Okay, we're going to turn this over to questions from you, but before we do that, I want you to understand these guys have 3 and 4 stars on their shoulder. A young seaman or a corporal is going to look at these guys, and his knees are shaking so much he can't even talk. So we're going to try to make them sound warm and fuzzy and ask them a couple of personal questions and a rapid fire. General Ward, since you're sort of scratching your nose over there, I want to ask you, what books are on your nightstand?
What books are on my nightstand?
And we don't want to hear Thucydides and Encyclopedia Britannica.
No, that's not they. The Bible's on my nightstand. I read the Bible. My manuscript is there in preparation. It's a work in progress. But I guess you're talking about other sorts of books as well.
That's enough. We'll all buy the book when it comes out.
There is one, though, one that former Deputy Secretary of Treasury Gordon England, he and I both from Baltimore, and we're old Baltimore Colts fans. I don't know anything about the Indianapolis Colts, the old Baltimore Colts. So I'm currently reading Johnny Unitas, which is a great quarterback for you youngsters. There you go, Johnny Unitas. So,
I want to ask you, General, if you're about to be deployed overseas again, the president calls and says, we need you, General. What are you going to do for that last meal that you have before you go anywhere?
Have it at home with my family.
This is a man who obviously has been married happily for a long time.
Indeed.
Admiral, what about you? What books are on your nightstand?
I'll tell you one that's really got my interest. There's certain books over the last couple of years that have really, you need to read to understand where we are. And the one that's gotten my attention lately is by Michael Oren, the current ambassador, Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Power, Faith, and Fantasy. And it really understands how we got into the Middle East, what our foreign policy, and I think in line, a very good understanding of why we're doing the things we're talking about here today. It's a riveting read.
A part of the world that really goes back 4,000 years.
That's
and
correct,
a conflict
Kathy.
that you may be new to, but nobody else is. I want to throw this open to the audience. We have microphones standing in 3 points. We obviously have people already lined up. And let me start over here. And if you say who you are, what organization you're with, and if there's anyone on the panel you want to throw your question to. And remember, I'm in television, so I know how to cut people off.
Okay, my name is Julius Coles. I'm at Morehouse College. I want to direct this question to General Ward. General Ward, there's no doubt in my mind that you were very much civilian-oriented in your mission when you were head of AFRICOM. I wonder if you feel that the mission has changed since Libya, and then all the developments in Mali, and then with the recent announcement of the establishment of drone base in Niger. If the mission has changed, if the Africa Command is equipped to handle the new mission? Thank you.
well, the command has always had as a part of its mission set those things that traditional combatant commands also do. When the command was stood up, the focus was on some of these other things, and so therefore the notion that we would be doing these sorts of things that are being headlined today wasn't a part of what was publicized. The command has at its core capabilities as any other combatant command, but it also looks to do those things in a way that also highlights the importance of, as we are addressing here, those other parts of our national elements of power that are truly the long-term guarantors of stability. And so while the focus seems to be on today what has gone on in places like Mali and Libya and elsewhere, to be sure, their focus still remains on those other military-to-military activities, those developmental activities that the military can support and enhance, as well as those sorts of things that go into helping to build a more stable environment because of the complementarity of our functionalities. And so is the command totally equipped to do that? I think the command, we continue to go through a process of amassing those sorts of capabilities, but I have no doubt in my mind that if they are required, our national command structure is such that through the apportionment of forces and the decisions to dedicate forces or capabilities to the command that would in fact be present and would be there.
I've got to interrupt at this point and say that the only people who aren't ranked 3- and 4-star admirals or generals are cabinet officers, and we have a cabinet officer who is standing by ready to talk to you. I am sorry that all the questions that all of you have lined up to ask, I'm going to just speak on behalf of my colleagues on this podium and say I'm sure that they'd be delighted to maybe answer your questions in private after the program. But right now, we have got to exit so you can listen to the Secretary of Treasury. Thanks so much for all your patience and cooperation. Thank you. And gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you. They are fabulous. Thank you, gentlemen.